Hi, and welcome to another Travel Fit Psych podcast episode. Today I'm joined by a special guest, Amanda from the World Wanderers. Amanda and her husband Ryan are travelers and digital nomads who share thought-provoking information on travel, destinations, and adventures on the World Wanderers podcast. I totally recommend that you check out the World Wanderers podcast for some inspirational interviews with other travelers in the digital nomad community. I first met Amanda and Ryan at the Casco Antiguo Spanish School in Panama City, in Panama, in January of 2020. Unfortunately, when COVID-19 hit that March, they decided to leave back to Canada. Amanda and I have continued to keep in touch, and today I talk with her about what it's been like to be based in Mexico over the past 1.5 years and to travel between Canada, the US, and Mexico during the pandemic. They're currently based in Querétaro, Mexico, and have managed to obtain temporary residency there. And Amanda is currently 7 months pregnant and looking forward to having their baby girl in Mexico. So I hope you enjoy this enlightening interview with Amanda. So, Amanda, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
No worries. And actually, I've been meaning to talk to you because the last time we saw each other was in Panama, which was at the start of 2020 when we were both over there traveling. And then you and your husband, Ryan, left in about March when the lockdown sort of first started and headed back to Canada.
Yeah, we left on March 18th, like right before the airport shut down in Panama. I think we just got out like days before the airport shut down.
Yeah, wow. And so I guess it was a bit of a rush to kind of organize all the plans and I guess head back.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. Like, I think because you were in Colombia for Carnival and we were too. You were in
Mm.
Cali, we were in Barranquilla. And I feel like it's just weird to think about the fact that that was like, I don't know, like the last week of February. And within 3 weeks of that, we were back in Canada, which was obviously never the plan. Like, we had a 1 year lease on an apartment in Panama City. We were planning to stay there for like many more months, like maybe even set up life there. And I don't know, I remember going to Colombia and being like, we'd heard of the virus. We kind of knew what was going on like in the other
Mm.
parts of the world, but it's like, oh, it hasn't made its way to like this side of the world. So it's fine. And then things just happened so fast in Panama. And then we were like, oh my God, I think we need to go back to Canada. And yeah, that's what we decided to do. And it was just crazy. Like we had an apartment and we had things in our apartment. Like we left behind, we had one of those like Costco size things
Mhm.
of Frank's Red Hot Sauce.
Yeah.
Like it was like gigantic. We left
Yeah.
like half of that there for our landlord to deal with. Like, and stupidly, we were like, maybe we can come back in like a month. So we'll just like not worry about it too much. Like it was clean and stuff, but we left like a lot of things behind. And I think I remember telling you we have toilet paper if there's a toilet paper shortage.
Yeah, exactly. You guys did give me some things to sort of hold on to, but like honestly, like you, I thought it would have finished in about kind of a month, 2 months. And we're here now in sort of November of 2021 and we're still going.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to think about that. Like I kind of just think about the fact that Ryan and I even had a conversation around like, let's not cancel our lease yet because maybe we can go back to Panama in April or May or in the summer or something like that. And I mean, it became quite obvious quite quickly that that wasn't going to happen. But the fact that we even like tossed that around, I just feel like it's so funny to look back on and just be like, what? Like, what
Yeah.
was happening at that point? It's just so different.
Amanda, you guys kind of have traveled around Canada, the US, Mexico. You've been in between those places in the last year and a half. And I'm just wondering what your thinking has been around travel.
Yeah, for sure. So it's definitely like evolved quite a bit. I mean, when we got back to Canada, we had to do a quarantine and most of the country was in lockdown since that was like the beginning of kind of the pandemic hitting, I guess, sort of like the Western hemisphere of the world. I know Panama went into a lockdown pretty quick after we left too. And we stayed in Canada from March until October. And I mean, summer in Canada is amazing. We like being there anyways. So once it finally started warming up in like June, July, we were like, okay, this is awesome. But
Yeah.
then, September hits, we get our first snowfall, and we're like, this is when we normally leave. Like, what are we going to do? And we
Mm.
really went back and forth like, do we leave? Do we not leave? What should we do? And just the way things were going, we were kind of like, we feel like there's a chance that as flu season happens again, this picks up again, and, everyone kind of just does the same thing all over again. And we had really not enjoyed the first lockdown we were a part
Yeah.
of. And we were like, we don't really want to do that again. Or if
Yeah.
we do have to do it, can we do it somewhere that's like cheaper and warmer than Canada
Mhm.
is, because Canada is both expensive and cold. And
Mm.
just doing research on various places kind of around the world, we landed on Mexico because they had no like rules or regulations to get in. So we didn't have to like test or quarantine to get there. We could get a direct flight. The case numbers like weren't too bad at that time. It seemed like they were going down because their seasons are kind of a little bit different than like ours are in Canada in terms of cold and flu. And yeah, we ended up making that decision. And I remember telling people, like telling my parents and telling some friends, and people were like, what? You're like going to leave? Like it's still a pandemic. And we were like,
Mm.
now we're going for it. We're
Yeah.
just going to do it. And so, yeah, we left for Mexico in October 2020.
Wow. So that was a real kind of ballsy move, right? Right in the middle of like the pandemic and things kind of being uncertain. And did you have any kind of hesitations or worries or doubts at that point?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Like we definitely were like, this feels a little bit uncertain. And I think the biggest like hesitation or doubt is that you just don't know what's going to happen. You just don't know
Mm.
what governments are going to do. You don't know what restrictions are going to come in place. And, it's obviously a lot more comfortable to get kind of stuck in a lockdown when you're in your home country where you have like family and friends and support, and you just, you speak the language natively and you just understand it a little bit more just because you grew up
Yeah.
there. And so we were definitely like, okay, so Mexico hasn't really locked down and Mexico doesn't really have a lot of restrictions, but like that doesn't mean that that couldn't change, and
Mm.
what happens if we get stuck in Mexico? Because we'd already done one, like, cancel our lease and run back home. I think
Yeah.
one thing we were thinking was like Mexico's a lot closer than Panama.
Mhm.
It's, you can get a direct flight back to Canada, and there's only one country in between, which is the US, which
Mhm.
was, pretty, I guess, like chill relatively with restrictions. So we were like,
Yeah.
okay, it should be easy to get home if we do need to. And so we felt pretty good about that. Plus, we've like lived in Mexico before. So Mexico is
Okay.
not totally like an out there decision, I guess, for
Mhm.
us.
Mhm.
And we decided to go to Puerto Vallarta, which is on the West Coast. It's a little bit more touristic. And part of that was that we had friends there. And so we
Mhm.
were like, if God forbid one of us gets sick, we know there's a good hospital there. We have like, a little bit of a support system, like people
Yeah.
who could drop us off water or medication or whatever. So
Mhm.
those were things we all kind of considered. And honestly, like there was definitely nerves until we got to the airport. And I think there was like 4 flights going to different cities in Mexico from the international terminal in Calgary. And it was
Mhm.
just full of old people.
Yeah, I remember you telling me this, and it was quite fascinating for me because I guess countries like Canada and Australia and New Zealand can be a bit more sort of conservative or reserved when it comes to these kinds of scenarios. And so just to just to hear you kind of say that is a bit surprising to me because I guess in this part of the world, in New Zealand, Australia, it's been, a lot of people have actually been quite terrified of, traveling and leaving the country and haven't wanted people to come back into these countries or to have the borders open. So to hear that, there's a bunch of older people in Canada wanting to leave to Mexico is just amazing to me.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing to me too, because I think Canada certainly has that vibe too. Like the Canadian border stayed closed between March 2020 until I guess it opened for Americans in August of 2021, and then internationals in September, but only people who are fully vaccinated. So our border is still closed to like anyone who hasn't been vaccinated so far. And I mean, Canada's like certainly not just like welcoming anyone in there.
Yeah.
You know, they had a hotel isolation or a mandatory like hotel quarantine for a good chunk of 2021 also. And yeah, I mean, lots of Canadians haven't left like since probably 2019 at this point. So I think there is a lot of fear and uncertainty and whatnot. So that's definitely not something that's not there in Canada. And I think that's partly why I was so surprised, just this packed flight where we were like the youngest people on the flight. And I'm like, aren't we doing all of this to like protect the older people? And here they are like on a plane going to Mexico, which to each his own. I'm completely fine with people choosing whatever their comfort level is. But I was definitely surprised by that. I was surprised to kind of experience that. I sort of expected to be on a scarcely occupied flight with probably like other people like Ryan and I who were like, you know, we're not super worried about this. We're going to go hang out in Mexico for the winter.
And so, you know, I'm always jealous of people kind of traveling to Central South America. I would love to kind of be there, and particularly Mexico, because it's so different in so many different places, and the culture is so different from, you know, countries like New Zealand and Australia and Canada. So I'm wondering, what has your time been like over there? Like, how have you enjoyed it? Because you're now there as well, and you're deciding to sort of stay there for a little bit.
Yeah, we've basically made a home in Mexico. So we ended up staying from October when we went until like mid-July of 2021. And then we went back to Canada for 2 months and then spent about like 2-3 weeks in the US, and then came back to Mexico, and now we'll be here just kind of for the foreseeable future is the plan. But yeah, I mean, things have been great in Mexico. I think one of the things that I was like first sort of struck by when we got here was just how different the vibe was with the virus. There's definitely precautions being taken. People wear masks, and, you know, particularly indoors, like almost everywhere you have to wear a mask indoors. They do like hand sanitizing and temperature checking. And there has been like quite a bit of capacity limitations on things, and many like big kind of public events like concerts and stuff were canceled for a good chunk of, you know, the end of 2020 and then into 2021. But they never really like stopped people from just kind of like living life. So it's like people are continuing to live life just with precautions. And so you go to an airport here and it's packed and your flight's packed, and, you know, people are traveling and people are doing their thing. And I think that was the thing that was like first very different for me, especially coming, you know, going Panama and then being in Canada for so many months and then deciding to leave again, was just how the vibe was quite different. And obviously Mexico's, you know, a different country from Canada. They don't have government support and government subsidies. So people have to go to work. People have to continue their businesses. And I think they're just trying to do their best here to do it while keeping people safe and making sure hospitals aren't over capacity and that type of thing. And it seems like they've done, you know, a pretty good job with it. And they use a stoplight system here. So it goes green, yellow, orange, red. Obviously green is best, red is worst. So I think almost all of the states are in green now. So they've started doing more things like concerts and events and increasing capacities and stuff like that. So it's just getting more like lively and normal here. But yeah, we spent about 2 months in Puerto Vallarta, and then we went to Querétaro, where we're now living, and then Mexico City for Christmas last year. And then we moved to Mérida for a couple of months in the Yucatan. We did a trip to the US for a friend's wedding / a visa run, and then moved back to Puerto Vallarta for the last like 3 months we were here. So I guess April, May, June, and part of July. And then, yeah, we just really fell in love with this city, Querétaro, which is close to Mexico City. And that's where we're planning to be for the next like 6 months at least.
Yeah, and in that process, you've managed to get residency, and you're now pregnant, which is fantastic. And you've decided that you're going to also have a baby in Mexico. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah,
It's all very exciting.
Yeah, lots of big changes in the last year. But yeah, we had some friends that were getting married in Colorado in February of
Mm,
2021. We had to leave the country at some point anyways, because as a tourist in Mexico, you just get 180 days. We
mm,
did have a little bit longer than that, but we figured that's a good time. We can spend a couple weeks in the States, see some friends. So we went and did like a kind of, I guess we went to 3 cities in the US. And we'd been kind of interested in Mexican residency, kind of curious about it. And so I just looked to see if the Mexican consulate in Denver happened to have appointments while we were there, and they did.
mhm.
And so I was like, okay, this must be a sign from the universe. I'll book it.
Yeah, why not?
And yeah, why not? We hired an immigration lawyer to help us with the paperwork. And then we were like, let's just go and apply. And so we went and applied and we got approved. And so we actually got approved for Mexico has 2 types of residency. So we're approved for temporary residency.
Right,
So you
okay.
get temporary residency for 4 years and then permanent residency after that.
Mhm,
And the major difference is that you can't actually like have a job in Mexico. So like I can't go legally apply at Starbucks and work here.
mhm,
That's the
mhm,
biggest difference between temporary and permanent residency. But we'd been considering it since we'd been kind of like living in Mexico for kind of 6 months of the year prior to going to Panama. And it felt like a good time just with like everything that was going on at that point. In early February, the government of Canada had just put in their like hotel quarantine. They'd actually canceled all flights between Canada and Mexico for like the foreseeable future. And we were like,
wow.
okay, I guess we're like, and obviously we could have gone through the US and we could have paid for the quarantine if we needed to get home and stuff. But we were kind of like,
Mm,
we're like a little bit stranded here. Like maybe we should have a bit of a backup plan in terms of, when borders are closed and you need to do border runs, what do you
mm.
do?
Yeah,
Right?
exactly, exactly.
And so, yeah, we just were like, why don't we go for it? We thought about it before we got
Mm,
approved. So that was really exciting. Yeah, now when we come into Mexico, we don't have to leave, which is really nice.
mhm,
And then, yeah, I got pregnant in May, I guess it would have been. So I'm like 7 months pregnant now. Baby's due at
mm,
the beginning of February.
yeah,
And we kind of went back and forth between like, do we go set up camp in Canada and have the baby there? Or do we just like continue living here? And we found like Mexico has, phenomenal healthcare on the private side
mhm,
of things, and it's very affordable. And we found a great midwife that I feel aligned with. So we decided, why not do it here? The baby will get another passport then. Life's just a little bit more chill here in terms of like not having to deal with lockdowns and a bunch
mm,
of regulations. Let's do that. We'd kind of honestly talked about having a baby in another country like years prior to COVID. We'd actually
mhm.
been looking at New Zealand, but I don't think
Oh,
they
okay.
give passports on birth.
I'm not sure about that. You might have to apply for it, I think.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think so. We were like, I think that was the country that my husband Ryan was like the most excited about. Like, we should
right.
go move to New Zealand, have a baby there, and then they
Yeah,
can have a Canadian passport and a Kiwi passport. But then we found out, yeah, New Zealand doesn't just like give passports on birth, I think is the case.
I
So,
would not know, but yeah, perhaps. Sounds
yeah,
about right.
I think like your kids would get it because like you have a New
New
Zealand
Zealand citizen,
passport.
yeah,
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 but because we're not citizens, I don't
yeah.
think that having a baby there would just give us that. But yeah,
Mm,
I think people were kind of like, "Oh, that's kind of an out there decision." And we were
yeah,
like, I mean, we've been talking about this well
yep,
before COVID, and I don't think
yeah,
either of us ever expected Mexico to be the choice, but
yeah.
here we are.
Yeah, and I guess, because you are both kind of digital nomads and you can kind of travel and do your work sort of online, and you do quite a lot of work around that and with things like that, I guess that's kind of enabled you to be a little bit more flexible and also to kind of think about plans for, how you might kind of like to live your life. From that perspective, how have things been kind of from the work side of
Yeah, so we're super lucky. We've been like working online since 2015 for me, 2016 for Ryan. So
Mhm.
we've been doing this like I guess like nomad life for quite a
Yeah.
while. We started in Asia in 2016 and have been, just going all over the place trying to find I guess like a quote unquote home, like a second base outside of Canada.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think with the pandemic, like obviously things were kind of weird at first. And I think there was lots of like changes and ups and downs. And I think one of the biggest things for me me was that I work with yoga teachers and yoga studio owners to help them with their businesses. And I work with these two studios, one in Canada, one in the US. And so they both went through these like pretty major lockdowns, pretty major shutdowns, and had to pivot online, like pivot their business model essentially like 360 degrees in like 24 hours.
Wow.
And so I supported with that right around the time that we were deciding if we were going to leave Panama. And I just remember it being so stressful.
Yeah, I bet.
So crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's been good overall. Like, I think we've both had lots of opportunities come out of the pandemic, which we're really lucky for, since obviously lots of people kind of like lost work and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, hopefully like a silver lining of this whole situation is that more people are able to work online in the future and do what we do if they want.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess because you had that kind of base established since kind of 2015, 2016, it was probably in some ways easier to continue. I imagine there are a lot of people who, want to do podcasts and do online work and still kind of travel at the moment who are starting up, and it's a little bit more saturated in terms of that market.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's like pros and cons, right? Because people are so
Yeah.
much more adjusted now to the idea of like somebody living in another country and like working abroad. And I think it's an easier pitch to your boss if you have like a full-time job and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, everyone kind of pivoting into that market at the same time, I feel like is obviously a lot, right? And I think with podcasting too, it's like people were adjusting their schedules. A lot of people listen to podcasts while they were commuting to work, which who's commuting to work these days?
Yeah.
And they also listened when they were at the gym, which how long were gyms closed for?
Yeah, that's true. Yep. What has been in the last year or so, what has been like the most exciting kind of parts for you in terms of like the travel and the work and I guess the adventuring that you've done?
Yeah, I think it's, so we were kind of talking about before, this like decision to go to Mexico was kind of like, oh my God, are we like doing the right thing? Is this the right decision, the wrong decision? And it ended up being for us the right decision. Canada went into a series of very, very strict lockdowns while being in like the dead of winter and stuff. They were basically in lockdown from like soon after we left, honestly, like probably December of 2020 until like May of 2021. So pretty much the whole time we were in Mexico. And I feel like just getting, I don't know, reassurance that we'd made the right decision and we were just able to like live life normally was really like a blessing, I guess you could say. So I feel like that was really nice. And then just getting to travel Mexico more. I think just getting to like go to, lots of cool places. Like I think a lot of people haven't been traveling. And I think more and more people are, just depending on like where they're at in the world. I know your kind of corner of the world still quite closed off, but hopefully opening up more soon. I know Asia is finally starting to open up and Australia is starting to open up and stuff. So hopefully more places are as well. But it's like just getting to see these places and getting to kind of, live in some cool cities in Mexico, I think has been, pretty exciting. And then, just getting to hang out with like other nomad friends. We made a really good community of friends while we were in Puerto Vallarta. And that was just really nice after having been in Canada and feeling like really isolated for 6+ months, however long we were there, 6 or 8 months.
Yeah, wow. Fantastic. And I guess, I'm always kind of curious about sort of emotional, psychological well-being, and sometimes sort of living out of a suitcase essentially is, it's not exactly the easiest thing to do. And, I just wonder from your perspective, how have you managed to kind of deal with, I guess, from a mental health sort of perspective, how have you managed to kind of deal with any stress or uncertainty, things like that? What do you guys do to kind of help?
Yeah, I think too, just to your point about like living out of a suitcase, I mean, it's definitely a downside of the lifestyle of being more nomadic. And it's something that we kind of learned early on. Like we had been backpacking prior, and that's what kind of spurred this like love of travel and this desire to live this lifestyle. But I think we learned pretty much in like our first, I guess, nomadic trip that when you're working full time, it's like just being a week in a place is like so hectic and stressful. Like you don't have enough time to even like buy groceries or do laundry because you're trying to juggle, getting your work done with also seeing this place that you don't have this much time in, and et cetera, et cetera. And we basically realized that like with this kind of lifestyle, we need, at least a month somewhere. And we actually really like longer stints, like 3 to 6 months is really nice time period to be in a city, to get, an apartment or an Airbnb or something like that. And then then you can actually unpack your suitcase, which is really
Yeah.
nice. And you can get to know a place, and you can, make sure you're grocery shopping. And so you're
Yeah.
eating healthier and getting into an exercise routine.
Right.
And those are things that are important to me. Like, I love to travel, but my physical well-being is also important. And then with the mental side of things, I think it's been, something that's really important for me is daily meditation. So every day, that's like one of the first things I do is I meditate, and then I do some sort of movement. I guess we could call it yoga. I feel like if somebody watched me, they'd be like, I'm not sure if that's yoga, but it's like
perhaps doing it in more of a mindful way, right?
yeah, mindful and just kind of more intuitive. Like, what does my
Yeah.
body need in this
Okay.
moment is kind of how
Yeah.
I move in the mornings. It's usually for like 20 minutes. And then when we're in places longer, I like to have like a gym pass or something like that. And I feel like that really helps mentally. And then the other thing has just been like trying not to spend too much time like reading the news, because I just feel like it's like doom and gloom. And like, of course, we need to know what's going on in the world. And when you're not in your home country and you don't live somewhere long term, you do have to be aware of what's happening both in the place that you're at and probably, some of the other places that impact you, maybe getting home or something like that. So I do keep my eye on like what's going on in the world and what's going on with the pandemic and stuff, but just try my best to just not get too sucked into that, because it's just, it's like a vortex of doom, really.
Exactly. Yep.
And
Certainly
I think
feels
that's
anxiety.
yeah, exactly. It for sure feels anxiety and stress, and, also just doing my best to like take care of myself and just taking, vitamins and prioritizing health and wellness. Cause I think that's another thing that people have been very afraid of actually getting sick and getting the virus. And I know that's something that's for a lot of people I know has really like gotten into their heads quite a bit. And so for me, it's just been really important to like, yes, there's this thing out here, but like there's all sorts of invisible things that could hurt me. And I just need to do my best to like take care of me and trust that everything will be okay. And if it's not okay, I guess we deal with that when it happens. And I think that that's, maybe somebody listening is like, that's a terrible approach, but like, that's just what's worked for me, so that I haven't been like, terrified to leave my house or terrified to leave, see my friends or go to a restaurant. Like, just doing my best to live my life has been honestly like one of the healthiest things I think I've done for my mental health.
Yeah, fantastic. Because I guess, when you get caught up in a lot of catastrophizing about things that may not happen, it can keep your life quite closed, and you can kind of start to, I guess, fear or get quite worried about doing things that typically one would do. Because, living life is risky. It's not like there's something saying that life is going to be safe and is always going to be safe, right? We just got to do the best we can and hope that, we aren't kind of faced with too many challenges or risks that we can't overcome.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, you said it perfectly. Like, life is inherently risky. Like, every time we leave the house, we take risks. And I think, like, I live in Mexico, so it's like I have a much bigger risk of like getting hit by a car or a bus than I do of like pretty much any like virus that's out there. And so, obviously I take precautions to not get hit by a car or a bus, because I really don't want that to happen, same as I do with other things. But I'm not going to stay inside constantly because I'm scared of getting hit by a car, It's like trying to manage those risks to the best of my ability. And I feel like that has just really helped my mental health with like the stress and uncertainty. And I think one of the times I felt the most stressed was when the government of Canada put in the new rules in, I think it was like February of 2021, maybe end of January. I'm not too sure exact time frame, but just saying if you wanted to come back to Canada, you had to test, and then you had to pay $2,000 to stay in a hotel for 3 nights. And then you had to isolate for the other 11 nights, and they'd canceled all the flights between Canada and Mexico. I feel like that was the one time where I was like, but like, what if there's an emergency? Like, I just think about my family, like my parents, my grandparents, like my brother. Like, what if something happens and there's no flights between Canada and Mexico? Like, how the heck am I supposed to get home? And that took a lot of like mental sort of fortitude. Like, I was mad at first. I was upset about it. I was quite angry by those rules and restrictions because I thought they were quite ridiculous, honestly. And then, just being like, I can't control this. Like, I don't get to make these rules. So instead of just dwelling on it or feeling frustrated about it, I just need to kind of like turn back to myself and turn inwards and just continue like taking care of myself, because there's nothing else I can do about it.
And I think that's been a struggle for a lot of people who have been stranded overseas and who have wanted to sort of come back to their sort of countries of origin, or just to kind of see people, family who might be unwell or dying. And it's been I guess it's a tragedy that people aren't able to do that as readily at the moment.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, it's a very real, frustrating, scary situation to think about being somewhere and like living somewhere that's not your home country, which has absolutely been like, okay, kind of up until this pandemic. And then like thinking about, oh, it's not that easy to just like get back to my family and friends. And that just puts people in really challenging situations, right? Where they have to kind of make decisions. And yeah, I mean, there's people who have had to make really, really hard decisions throughout this whole thing. And I think that's definitely one of like the crappiest things about just like all the restrictions to travel and, all the hoops you have to jump through and just like borders being closed and stuff like that. We even had some friends who they're Canadian, but they're teachers in Macau, and they finished their contract and were like getting rid of their apartment. And she's like, but I don't know how we're going to get back to Canada because it's like the flight routes were so challenging. And they were finally able to figure something out and, find a flight route that would get them back. I think it took them like 4 days to get between Asia and Canada, though, which is like, there's never direct flights between Macau and Canada. They always had to take some sort of a layover, but just what they would have normally done was just not possible. And I just think like, can you imagine if there was like an emergency situation, it takes you 4 days to get home and like 4 COVID tests and isolations and all these things. It's just very tricky.
Exactly. And it's definitely something to consider, because I remember when I was trying to leave Panama, it was hard to get into Australia, where I was supposed to be going back to, because the flights were grounded. And so it was about trying to figure out how to get to LA, and then how to get from LA to New Zealand, which was going to be a lot easier for me. And so, even that was quite a mission, just to sort of think about logistically and where you'd be stopping, and could they change the rules and regulations at the border in the US, at any moment. So you had to kind of really do your research and just take a gamble, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's just crazy. I think I remember when that was happening, I was like, you should spend some time in LA, just hang out there. You're like, no, I just need to get home.
Yeah. And, you have to have the contingency plans as well. What if you get stranded there because you missed your flight, or it doesn't go,
Yeah, for sure. And I remember you were like, well, there's like not that many flights. And then you had to book into the managed isolation. And so it's like, if you miss your flight, you're kind of screwed for isolation. So yeah, not all like rainbows and puppies for a lot of people trying to travel these days. And I find it so interesting just how different the situations can be. Like, I feel like it was kind of strange and sort of surreal for me living in Mexico, and we're going on like a group trip here, and like we're going away for the weekend here, and we're like doing this here, and my friends and family in Canada are like, we can't even leave the house, like we're not even allowed to see anyone who's like who we don't live with. And I'm like, that's so strange. And then we had a lot of friends that this wasn't what we chose to do, but we had a lot of friends that went to Europe this summer. A lot of people traveling over to Europe. I think people were kind of like, we're over it. Europe's open. Yeah, screw it, we're going. And it seems like that was, has gone well for most people, but then there's also lots of hoops to jump through in that regard. So it's just kind of interesting, because I feel like there's some places that feel quite normal and some places that feel very restricted still. And then it kind of just seems to depend on like where you want to go and how you want to get there. And is it an emergency? Is it for pleasure, et cetera, which determines the situation.
Yeah, exactly. I guess, I've always kind of looked at your social media posts and stories of the beautiful sunsets and like what looks like warm, lovely weather, and you traveling around and just been sitting at home in lockdown, or not being able to do too much in the restrictions, and just sort of looking at the life over there and wishing I was over there, which is quite hard to, I guess, even think about for me, going across to Latin America and doing some travel, just because it's so hard to even come back and get into the countries in this side of the world. But hopefully that, that changes very soon. But I'm actually wondering also, how do you manage with like the frustrations of, a less developed country? You're used to Canada and all the, comforts that it can afford. And I guess, having traveled through Central America myself and kind of knowing that things don't operate on time or as you had kind of expected it, or as it should, how do you kind of deal with that? Especially because it's not, in your own language that you're, 100% fluent in?
Yeah, no, for sure. That's a great question. I think Mexico is like definitely a step up from like most kind of Central American and a lot of South American countries. Like I feel like they have so much American influence that Mexico is actually like a very easy country to live in, I think.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, when we'd been here for 8, 9 months, and then we were heading back to Canada, and I was like, yeah, I'm like ready for like a little break from Mexico. Like it's pretty noisy here. Like it's busy all the
Hmm.
time. Like it's kind of
Hmm.
noisy and busy all the time. Canada's not really like that. Canada's very quiet for the most part, unless you
Hmm.
live in like downtown Vancouver, downtown Toronto or something like that. I feel like there's a lot of like scents here all the time, like in terms of things that just smell. Like there's kind
Okay.
of just a
Is that a good
everything's
thing?
very, and not for me. I feel like it's just like very floral here. And at the end of, and especially I was in my first trimester of pregnancy. So I was
Yeah.
just like really ready for like things to not be scented. I was like
Uh-huh.
just ready to like be in a country where everything's not like floral scented. But then after a couple months of being in Canada, where everything's very like, I mean, it's very expensive there, first of all. And then it's also just very rigid. Like the culture is a lot more rigid. And I think it's
Mm.
become even more so with the pandemic. I was kind of like, I'm like ready to get back to Mexico, where
Yeah.
people kind of do their own thing a little bit more. It's just like a
Yeah.
little bit more lively here. The culture is very like open and kind of festive and stuff like that. So I think, I don't know. I kind of always feel like I was like maybe born in the wrong country, quite honestly. I know
Yeah, I
you and
think
I
I
have
had
talked
that
about
feeling.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like I don't know that I was necessarily meant to be born in like the frigid tundras of Canada, but I was, and that's a beautiful thing. I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful, to be Canadian, to have my family, my passport, all those things. But I feel a little bit more at home when I'm kind of not in Canada. So
Hmm.
I think that's something that just makes it kind of easy for us here. My husband and I have both felt quite at home in Mexico. I think one of the things we do miss, which is nice, like if we can go to Canada or the US or something, is like just there's some products that we like there.
Right.
Like just like to go to like a grocery store, and there's a few things we can't get here. And we're like,
Hmm.
cool. We're like stocking up on all of our favorite things from
Yeah.
Canada, US. And then once we get our fill of that, we're like, okay, we're ready to go back and get some Mexican food again.
And I think because you've traveled Mexico more than I have, and it's, on my to-do list, how do the cities in Mexico kind of compare to Panama City, for example, which also has quite a lot of US influence, but it's not as big because I guess the population in Panama is about 4 million in total. It's a lot smaller than Mexico. But how do you find the differences between the two countries?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I loved living in Panama. I liked that it was a smaller country. I liked that, Panama City was like quite developed. I feel like
Mm.
Panama City feels in a lot of ways very Americanized, yet it still
Yeah.
keeps its like Latino flavor to it, which is a really beautiful thing.
Yeah.
The food and the
Oh, okay.
culture
Yeah.
and the dance and the
I mean,
music.
yeah.
I feel like it kind of depends where you are in Mexico. Mexico is like obviously a gigantic country and it's very diverse. But I feel like, for example, like in the city we're in here, Querétaro, it's like about the same size as Panama City. So like a million and a half people,
Hmm.
quite a lot of like American influence from international companies. Like, there's nice interstates and the roads are really
Mm.
good here. And there's nice like apartment buildings. Like we probably live in an apartment equivalent to our apartment in Panama City, where we have like a
Hmm.
pool and a gym and a nice like,
Security.
yeah, security, exactly. So I think it just depends where you are. I would say in general, Mexico is probably cheaper than Panama City.
Hmm.
But most of Mexico, you can't drink the tap water, which is one thing I loved about living in
Yeah.
Panama City.
That does make it a lot easier when you can drink the tap water and you're not dehydrated from the heat and having to like constantly be buying plastic bottles of water.
Yeah, for sure. You can get good filtration systems and stuff here, and the water is improving quite a bit in Mexico, especially in like the major cities. Like I
Hmm.
think that here we probably could drink it. We're a little bit cautious with it, especially with me being
Okay.
pregnant and stuff. But
Yeah.
you do want to be like pretty like I'm certainly not advising anyone traveling Mexico to drink tap water, especially if they haven't been here before, because
Yeah.
their stomach will probably freak out.
Yeah. I mean, I have so many more questions, but I'm just kind of aware of the time. But it's been so fantastic to kind of chat with you, Amanda. And, you and Ryan, kind of your husband, lead kind of one of the most exciting lives of people that I know in terms of travel. It's kind of a life or a lifestyle that I would, like to also live. But it's been great to kind of hear, what it's been like for you traveling across countries during this time, and especially kind of being based in Mexico, and what it's been like compared to sort of Canada during the pandemic. I'm just wondering, any kind of final words or anything that you might sort of impart in terms of travel wisdom?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, normally my travel wisdom is like, just get out there and do it if you want to. And
Uh-huh.
I feel so hesitant. Like, part of me feels hesitant to say that because I think there's still some like worldly stigma, like global
Yes.
stigma around doing that. But at the same
Uh-huh.
time, I do feel like we're getting to a point where we should be getting back out there again and we should be exploring the world again. And I think that, I think it's important to experience other cultures. And I hope that we haven't like lost that in the
Mm-hmm.
last year and a half, almost 2 years of a lot of us being grounded. So, I just hope that things continue to open up around the world and people can like
Mm.
start getting out of their home countries. I hope that the lockdowns end. I mean, you've been through way more lockdown than I have. And I told you the other day, I was like, I don't even know how you're sane anymore. I did it one time and I was like, nope, not into it, not doing this again. This was horrible.
Yeah. Yep.
So just like sending a lot of like love and good vibes to anyone else who's been in lockdowns for ages, and just hoping that those places start to relax a little bit and open up a little bit. And yeah, I mean, if you're feeling like, hey, I want to get out there, I mean, maybe
Mm-hmm.
just take a little leap of faith. I feel like it was something that we just had to do. Like, even being seasoned travelers, like we were pretty nervous to leave Canada in the
Mm.
pandemic to go to Mexico. And it was like direct flight, country we're really familiar with, going to a place where we had a lot of friends. So I get it. But it's like, I also feel like that was one of the best decisions we've made in the last 2 years. So yeah,
Yeah.
maybe just go for
Yeah,
it.
just go for it. And I think, planning and organization obviously helps, and, some forethought about what you're doing. But yeah, I guess if you can, why not, if it's
Yeah,
possible?
for sure. Especially if
Yeah,
you're working remotely and you're like stuck at home. Maybe
yeah,
there's somewhere else you could work remotely and not be
yeah.
so stuck.
Yep, literally what I was thinking last night.
That's fair.
Awesome. Well, it's been so great to have a chat with you, Amanda. And, hopefully we can cross paths in the not so near future, somewhere in Latin America, maybe Mexico. I look forward to that day. So thank you so
Yeah.
much for joining us today.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope that we get to have an in-person hug and an in-person
Yeah.
coffee again and person drink at some point in the future. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
No, you're welcome. It's been a pleasure having you here. And I definitely have to say hello to your little girl when she's born.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. She can't wait to meet you.